got that REC and that little arrow, it's going, it's
Okay.
recording. And this W and the T right here.
All right.
We're here, this is March the 14th, 2007. We're visiting with Cletis Odle. We're going to discuss his World War II experience. Mr. Odle, would you tell me your full name, please?
Cletis Raymond Odle.
And when were you born, Mr. Odle?
January 6, 1927,
And where?
Westville, Oklahoma.
And how far over from Arkansas line is that?
2 miles over the Arkansas
2
line.
miles.
Yes.
You're almost born in Arkansas then.
Almost.
Tell me your parents' names.
My dad's name was Dud Odle. My mother's name was Bertha Odle.
Do you remember her maiden name?
Brown.
She was a Brown. Were any of your relatives from Crawford County earlier on? Or where did they come to Oklahoma from?
My grandfather and grandmother came through this area way back in the 1800s, and she said my mother said she had 2 little brothers that were born and they died here at a very young age, just a small child. But she doesn't know where they were buried. She thinks maybe they were buried around Evansville, but she doesn't know.
When the wagon trains were going through here, probably.
Probably.
Well, that's part of our history.
Then they moved on up to Adair County.
Was your father a farmer?
No, he was in the grocery business.
Oh, he was. So he
Yes.
had his store?
He had stores. He ran stores, and he also ran a very interesting thing. He peddled groceries out in the country out of a little truck.
Oh.
He done that for about 10 or 12, 14 years.
Well, tell us where his grocery route was and where his stores were. Talk a little bit about that.
His grocery route run 5 days a week, different routes every day in Adair County, Oklahoma, out of Westville. And the stores that he ran after he quit peddling were in Westville.
Oh, they were. Well, did he peddle even before automobiles? Did he peddle from a wagon?
No, just a truck,
Oh,
just a little truck.
Well, that would have been understandable because people didn't have transportation.
Many people said they don't know what they would have done if it hadn't been for him. He brought it right to their door. In fact, that was the name of the store, Odle's Store at Your Door.
Oh, now that's nice.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what year they went through Crawford County and settled in Oklahoma?
It would probably have been prior to 1889, which was the year my mother was born. So it would have been probably in around 1880.
So her family, her Brown family, settled in Adair County?
Adair County, Oklahoma, from North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. And where were the Odles from? Do you have any idea about that history?
He was born in Weddington, which is close north of Lincoln, between Lincoln and Siloam Springs.
That's right.
And they moved to Indian Territory when he was just a boy.
Oh, yes.
Wild country.
Oklahoma became a state
1907.
1907, so they were there before then.
Before it, yes.
Well, that's an interesting piece of history. You know they saw some interesting things.
Yes, it was wild country, and you could go in there and clear the land out, build you a house, and farm the land without owning it. But you could not own it because it was the Indian, belonged to the Indians.
I see.
But if they wanted to buy it from you, they had to pay for your house.
Oh, I see. Well, did your father talk about the land rush that happened when?
No, that wasn't in that area.
Oh, it was
that
not?
was up in Kansas,
No, it was.
Kansas border,
Oh, I see.
where the land rush was.
Well, I know they would have had some interesting stories.
Yes.
Okay, so did you go to school there in
Westville, in Westville, Oklahoma.
How many years did you get to go to school?
All 12 years.
Oh, you were graduated from high school
Yes.
then. And what year did you graduate from high school?
1944.
So all during your high school years you were hearing about the war.
Yes.
Do you remember what you were doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Very distinctly. I was listening to the radio, and none of the other members of the family had heard it. So I was in another room, and I come rushing in there where the other families was and said, "Come listen to the radio."
Oh.
So we went in there, and naturally it was on all stations at that time. We hadn't turned the radio on all day. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I first heard it.
Well, being that young, did you have a sinking feeling that you might be going to war, or were you so young that it didn't really?
Well, I was about 14 years old at that time.
Old enough to realize what war might be?
Yes, I fully knew what it would mean.
Well, from then on, what did the boys at school talk about related to
Well, they talked about, I don't remember, but
wanting to go or not
they
wanting
was
to go?
talking about war, of course.
Probably in his school classes. It was
Oh,
just
yes, it was very much talked about.
Describe that era, describe that feeling that started in the country after Pearl Harbor. Describe what the country reacted like.
Well, naturally, they were angry at Japan. But they understood that we had to defeat Germany probably first. So we were angry naturally already at Germany because of the persecution of innocent people, especially the Jews.
So you were hearing about that even that early?
Yes, we really we heard about the war naturally. My dad, he would talk about it, you know.
How many brothers and sisters did you have at home?
I had 2 brothers and 7 sisters. 6 sisters.
6 sisters.
2 brothers and 6 sisters.
Were you first, second, third, or how were you?
Number 7.
Number 7. Well, your older brothers then, what were they doing about that time?
Well, my older brother, was almost old enough to be in the service at that time. So he enlisted in the Marines shortly after the war started. My other brother was drafted into the Navy about a couple more years.
What were you thinking? Which did you think would be the best choice?
Well, I kind of wanted the Navy, but I didn't get my choice. They drafted me into the Army.
As soon as you were out of high school, did you already have?
Just a little bit. No, let's see. I graduated at 17, and just as soon as I was 18, then I was drafted.
So go ahead and tell us about that.
Well, I was drafted into the Army in March of 1945. Took my basic training at Camp Fannin, Texas. Then come home for a furlough, and on the way back to Camp Rooker, Alabama, I heard about the atomic bomb. And
that it had been put off already? Or that it was in the...
While I was going there.
That it was being...
While I was on the train down to Camp Rooker, Alabama, I heard about the atomic bomb, and all sorts of stories came out of that. One rumor said this could blow the whole world up. They didn't know how powerful it really was, but they knew it was definitely a powerful weapon.
Had it already been exploded at that time, or you're just waiting for it? You're just
no,
hearing
it was already exploded on Hiroshima.
Yes.
Then the next 2 days later, the one on Nagasaki, which ended the war.
So the rumors and the what-ifs were flying on the train.
They didn't know what would happen.
Had there actually been no indication, had none of the people you were acquainted with had any indication that something big was about to happen?
We had no idea that anything like that was going to happen. Nobody knew it. It was top secret.
So top secret that no one had...
No one had any idea about it.
Well, boy, that was uncertain, uncharted waters.
Yes.
For the world, wasn't it? Well, did the boys on the train act jubilant over the idea, or did they act even more worried?
They was happy, of course, but they was wondering if it could blow the whole world up almost, you know, cause something really bad to happen. There was mixed emotions about it.
Okay, so where did your train leave you?
Camp Rooker, Alabama.
And what were you doing at that camp?
I just stayed there just a few days, and then I went to Fort Ord, California, to depart for the Far East.
Oh. Well, what unit were you in, or division, or whatever they
Well,
call it?
it was just replacement, infantry replacement, so I didn't, I wasn't in a unit long enough to
Did it
be
make you,
counted.
did it make you feel somber to think that they were training you to be a replacement for someone that probably had been killed? Did you
Well,
think about
I knew that it was a possibility that I wouldn't come back,
Oh.
because Japan, see, was still going strong.
Well, they were.
And, you know, this atomic bomb had been dropped. But then, just as I was leaving San Francisco Harbor, the Japanese come on board the USS Missouri and signed the surrender.
And that news
So
traveled?
that made me feel better.
Did that news travel to you before you left San Francisco? Or
I heard it on the ship.
on
Yes,
the ship?
I
You
knew
were
it.
already on the ship?
I knew it when it was signed.
So everybody sighed a big sigh of relief at that?
Yes.
Oh, and jubilation. Thanks.
Very much of a relief. And imagine my family did. My mom and dad, I imagine they sighed a sigh of relief.
Before we get you on over to your duties then, I'd like you to talk about your brothers. What were a little of their experiences and their names, please?
My older brother was Randolph, and he was in the 1st Marine Division. And they invaded the island of New Britain, which was where the biggest Japanese base in the Southwest Pacific was, and that was Rabaul. And he developed a fever called typhus fever, and he was out of his head for about a week. Very serious.
Did they ship him back home on medical leave? Or
After a while, after a few months, they shipped him back to the United States.
I think some of our boys contracted some terrible diseases and died from even those fevers.
A lot of them died, yes.
And then your other brother, what was he inside?
He was in the Navy, and he went to the Aleutian Islands up by Alaska.
Yes.
And he was there for probably at the time that the war ended, I would say.
Okay, so you have one that was in New Britain, you had one on the seas in the Navy, and now they've put you on a ship going to the east, Far East.
Far East.
So where do you first dock, and what do you first get for assignment?
We stopped at Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, to let some men off that had high points for release because the war was over.
Yes.
They had been in the European war, and they shipped them over here. So we stopped there.
Tell me what those guys, if they'd been in the European war, what did they act like? How were they mentally and?
Oh, they was all right. I went on over to the Manila with some of them that were in the war over there.
Well, were they just that much more determined to fight the Japanese after they defeated the Germans?
Well, they were determined, but the war was over, you see.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. All right, so you're at your first assignment, and what are you doing on these islands in the south?
Well, we just took the motor broke down on them, so we had to stay there about two weeks or better. So we went up to Schofield Barracks, which was just out of Honolulu. Well, we could go down there to Honolulu any day we wanted to, get a leave to go down there. So we just went down there to Honolulu and walked around Pearl Harbor and saw the ship that was made a museum.
Was it already a museum by that time, at the end of the war?
No,
Not yet.
I don't think so.
Well, that was quite a memorial.
And
That was
there's a lot of pretty sights around Honolulu,
Yes.
so we just enjoyed ourselves.
2 weeks
about 2
in Hawaii, and that a vacation.
A paid vacation, you might say.
But that didn't last too long.
A little over 2 weeks.
So then?
We went to another island and took some men on, Inuit.
Oh, yes.
Have you ever heard of that name?
Yes.
Inuit Island. It's a beautiful island, just very small. Then we went on towards the Philippines, and got in the tail end of a typhoon, and
Oh.
that ship rocked and rolled for a few days, and
What about the seasickness? Did you bother?
got seasick for 2 or 3 days when it first started.
The typhoon?
No, not the typhoon. You don't stay sick. You just stay sick for about 2 or 3 days, and then you get over it.
I see.
Then it can rock all it wants to, and you won't get sick.
So the first 2 or 3 days you were on
I was
sea
sick.
were rough.
I lost my breakfast, dinner, and supper.
Oh.
So for 2 or 3 days, and then after that was over.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now then when you're in the Philippines, are they putting you to reconstruction or?
Well, I didn't do much of anything there, to tell you the truth.
Tell us some of your impressions of the damage left from the war and the things that you saw.
It was terrible. In the Philippines, Manila was very much torn up, very much torn up. But not like some of the cities in Europe, in Germany.
Really?
I went over there later on.
Were you able to interact with the local people from the Philippines?
Yeah.
Were they starving, hungry? Were they in good shape?
Well, not at that time. We fed them. The Americans fed them, and they were not there at that time.
So some rebuilding.
Yes, they was rebuilding.
Had already begun
Yeah,
at the time.
they'd begun rebuilding some of it, the airport and the building.
How long did you get to stay in the Philippine area?
Not very long, because I re-enlisted for 1 year, and then they sent me from there to Germany.
Oh, I see. Well, how did you get
That
from
was-
there to Germany?
I come home for 30 days,
All right.
30-day vacation. Then I went from New York to France and went through France to Germany.
What ship or how did you get over the seas?
A boat.
Which one do you remember what boat it was? Was it
I
a
can't.
military boat or a
It
regular?
was just a troop ship.
Oh, I see. So you landed
In France, went through France to Germany.
and I'm sure you're seeing a lot of war damage.
Seen a lot of war damage, especially in Germany. All the big cities in Germany were a pile of rubble.
Oh.
Every major city in Germany was a pile of rubble. See bathtubs sticking out of a pile of concrete. They hadn't started rebuilding at that time.
Tell us a few of your experiences. Did you run into the local German people and
Oh, yes.
what was their attitude toward American troops?
Well, they sort of liked us.
The common
And,
people were grateful.
Yes, I think the majority of the German people were relieved that Hitler was dead and the war was over,
Of course they were.
because they were tired. They'd been 12 years of Adolf Hitler had ruined them and just left them totally drained and tired. They was tired of it. So they was.
Had the people begun returning to their cities by the time you went through?
Yeah, they was
What?
back. Yeah, they was.
How were they living? Describe some of the situations you saw.
Well, I was down in the Bavarian Alps, and there was a lot of farming going on, just small farms, and they raised what they ate. They raised beets and garden products, and they lived on that.
So they fared better probably than the people.
Fared
in the
better than the big cities.
Oh, certainly did. have.
And you know, big old people, I would see old men and women out there in the field raking hay and throwing it up on a wagon and going and putting it in a barn. Probably 80 years old. But that's
Well,
all.
they were like America.
There was no
Their young men had been taken into war, hadn't they?
that's all they had. They didn't have no Social Security or nothing like that to live
I
on.
know.
So they had to do that or starve. They was on their own.
Yeah. Did you ever try to communicate with one of them?
I learned a little bit of the
Oh,
language,
you did?
German, but I forgot it by
Oh,
now.
sure.
I had nobody to talk with.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Before I left, I could talk a little bit of German.
And the people were grateful for any communication.
Yes,
I'm
they
sure
they
were.
enjoyed talking to me, and I kind of liked the German people.
Yes.
They were very industrious.
Yes.
They liked to work.
Mm.
That's strange, but it seemed like they liked to work.
It's an unusual attitude in the world today, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, I just want you to pick up from the time you got off the shore at France. Describe going through France for me. I'm not going to interrupt you. I want you to just tell your story now, all the way through Germany.
Well, I landed Le Havre, France, the port of Le Havre, and went through France. It didn't take very long to go because we were on a train. So it was just countryside like we see, and I didn't get to visit with any of them much. I spoke to a few along the way, and some of them had some wine, and they gave me a cup of wine, and I took a sip of it. Didn't much like it. And
They were giving you the best they had.
I didn't see too much destruction because I didn't go through the big cities.
Yes.
So I didn't see much of France. That's about all I could tell you.
Just cross country.
Yeah, just cross country.
But when you got into Germany, then it was
Got
different.
into Germany, and the Bavarian Alps is a very beautiful place.
Describe that for people who've never been there.
Well, if I had some pictures, I could show you better, but if you've ever been into the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, I've seen pictures of that. It would be similar.
Mm.
And I've been up to the highest mountain, I think, in the Alps. I mean, in the German Alps.
Yes.
On a cable car.
Oh, you did get to go.
Went over in Austria and went up on the mountain in a cable car. Very beautiful scene.
Mm.
And another very interesting place was Hitler's hideout. You've heard of Hitler's hideout.
Oh, yes.
Call it the Eagle's Nest.
Yes.
It's down at Berchtesgaden, which is right at on the border of Germany and Austria.
Yes.
It's a resort place.
Uh-huh.
And so I went up to that, and of course the house was bombed.
Oh, yeah.
But down in the basement, there was a door that led into a tunnel.
Oh.
And this tunnel was about 10 feet high and about 10 feet wide, and had some rooms where Hitler and his mistress would sleep, and some servants would sleep. And it also had a periscope there,
Really?
where you could look out and see if there was any enemy planes in the air. But, well, it went on around about a quarter of a mile and had another exit about a quarter of a mile at the end of this tunnel.
And you were there. Did
I went through it.
You went through it.
Went all the way through it. Very interesting piece of
Was it outfitted with riches? I mean, did he have riches in there, or was it just
There was
meager
nothing in there,
by
but
the time you came?
nothing in those. They were empty. Those rooms were empty, and it was covered with tile.
Oh,
The
yeah.
tunnel was inlaid with tile. Very, very interesting place.
And how did you get up to that place? On a cable car?
Walked.
Oh, you walked?
I finally me and another guy walked about halfway up and caught a ride on a log truck.
Is that right? You mean the Germans were already logging? They were already logging. Well, that would have been lumber for reconstruction. Yeah.
Yes.
But was this on your time off, your leave days?
Yeah, I was on a vacation.
Vacation.
I spent a week down there at the Berchtesgaden.
There was no restriction on coming and going from Hitler's hideout then?
No, you just went up there and no guards or nothing around.
Was there is it still maintained? Do you know anything
Oh,
about
I
that?
imagine they've reconstructed the house now.
To
And,
keep it there as a
Keep it there.
historic spot?
It's a historic spot, I'm sure. I'm sure it is.
Did they think that Hitler stayed there most of the war, or was it just during the last
No,
days?
he just went down there when he went to Pout.
Oh, yeah.
on a vacation or 2 or 3 days at a time. He didn't go down there a whole lot. Just-
Do they think that's where he committed suicide or was killed?
No, he committed suicide in Berlin,
Oh, he did?
right under the chancellery. He had a big den down there, about 50 feet below that chancellery.
Another safe
Yeah,
hiding place.
safe haven there. He thought it was safe.
Yeah.
But the Russians had surrounded it, and he saw that that was the end of the road, and he didn't want to be captured. So he shot himself, and he commanded his officers to burn him and his mistress with gasoline after he shot himself. So he was burned to a crisp.
Did he kill his mistress too?
No, she took poison.
Oh my. Those were horrible times, and he'd inflicted such horror on the world
Yes.
that he knew he'd find no leniency anywhere.
Oh no, he knew that what he would get, and he thought he was robbing justice,
Oh yes.
but he didn't rob justice.
No, he had a greater debt to pay yet.
He just went to hell a little bit earlier
Yes, than
than
he
he
would
would
have.
have.
Okay, so you're spending this vacation touring Hitler's hideouts and seeing parts of the country. What were your actual duties when you were on your assignments?
Patrolling the back roads of the mountains
Oh,
to be sure that no insurrection
yes.
or revolution would
Hopefully no Hitler followers were still hiding in the hills.
yeah,
Well, did you find any trouble in the
no
hills?
trouble whatsoever.
Isn't that wonderful?
They were ready for peace.
They were needing it.
They were ready for peace, yes.
Their mind was made up. So was that your entire service?
Yes, that was all I done after, when I was in Germany. It was called the Constabulary Forces.
Yes. Was it during cold winter?
No, it was in the summer.
Wow.
But even in the summer,
Now,
it
we're
wasn't
talking
very-
about the summer of 45.
Yeah, 46.
46 by now, okay. We're in summer of 46 by now.
Mhm.
Okay.
It was cool up there because the mountains, you know, are higher
Oh, yeah.
temperatures, higher elevations, naturally lower temperatures. So it was cool up there.
Were those mountains so high and severe that there was no room for farming in that area you were patrolling? Or were there small farms?
There were
here?
small farms in
Well,
there.
did you see farm animals, or had all those
Oh,
things
yes.
been killed?
Yes, there was cattle up there. Yes.
So all their livelihood had not been killed in the bombings
No.
and so forth. That's probably the base that rebuilt Germany,
Mhm.
besides the American and Allied
Yes.
funds that went in to rebuild. Them having some of their livelihood left, they were able to feed part of their country.
Yes, they helped to feed themselves. We helped them a little bit, but
Yes.
they helped too.
What were the other men in your unit assigned to? How many of you were patrolling these back roads together at one time, and what other assignments were they given?
There were probably 3 or 4 vehicles in each patrol.
Uh-huh.
They were armored cars
Oh.
and jeeps.
Well, were the roads bombed out at all in the mountains?
No, they were still pretty good. They were just country roads. So
Dirt
sometimes
roads.
there was nothing but a trail.
Oh, put your armored vehicle on a mountain trail in the Alps?
I mean, it would be a road, but you
Yes.
might call it a trail.
Yes.
That's about all it was.
Oh,
2
yeah.
tracks.
So some of you were assigned to patrol in the cities also?
We went through cities, yes we do. We went through the small cities. And sometimes we would surround a city and go into the houses to make sure there wasn't no ammunition and weapons
Oh.
stacked in there. And we never found anything.
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but the countryside would have had to been scoured to make sure there were no weapons or trouble spots brewing.
That's what we done.
Well, did you hear of other of your groups out patrolling that did run into any trouble?
Never heard of anything.
Not any? Isn't that the wonderful thing about it?
They were ready to give it up.
Well, did any of the local people in Germany, in Bavaria or the areas you were in, actually try to, I'll just say make you part of their family, but include you in their normal life?
Yes. One place I was at, I took my laundry over there to their house, this man and woman, and they done my laundry, and I paid them a little, you know, and they had a little girl about like that, and she'd come get on my lap.
Oh.
And that made me think about home.
Oh.
So, and I liked them, they liked me,
Huh.
and it's just wonderful.
Well, that was good for both parties, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was.
Did you were not married yet?
No.
Were you? No
I
family
was
at home
only
of your own?
I was 19 at that time.
Just a young man out getting acquainted with the world.
Yes. Yes.
Well, go ahead and give us your images of then. How long you were in Germany and what change you saw?
Oh,
during
I was
that
in
time?
Germany about 9 months, and when I left there, the things was getting along a little better, you know.
Have they cleaned up a lot of the rubble in the cities by now?
No,
Not at all?
hadn't got started much on that. Too much. It's too much.
That was just such a huge undertaking.
Yes.
Well, it took a lot of construction equipment. We had war equipment in Europe, but we had no construction equipment there yet to speak of.
No, there wasn't much construction equipment there at that time.
Did our Americans, military, bring in dozers and things to help with that cleanup?
Well, I'm sure there was some construction going on a little bit to...
Who was your commanding officer? What general or whatever division you were in?
Well, I remember one called Hamby, but General Hamby.
Huh.
Colonel Hamby was his name.
Colonel Hamby.
But that's about the only one I remember.
Tell us what unit you're finally assigned to. If you were in a replacement pool, what is the name of this organization you're patrolling with?
Well, it's called the Constabulary Forces. That's about all I remember. I don't remember the unit even.
Okay. We had to have constabulary forces on all the islands in the Pacific and in Germany. I'm sure they were also in France, parts of Italy, maybe all of Italy, because the peace, once gained, had to be maintained.
Yes.
Are there other images that stay in your mind of Germany?
Well, they're kind of...
Did you see large cemeteries? Did you visit the troops' cemeteries where our troops were buried?
No, I didn't see any of the cemeteries where our troops were buried. I saw some of the German cemeteries.
What?
Small, like there in one little town, I saw a German cemetery.
They were probably buried in mass graves.
And this one, I remember, he had his helmet hanging on the grave.
Oh, so you know he was a soldier.
Yeah.
Many, many, many of them buried somewhere. What about the Jews? You were there soon after all the liberation of the prison camps.
Yes.
Tell me what you learned about those things for your own knowledge, from your own knowledge, not from what someone else has said. Because the reason I'm asking this is because we've actually heard in these days, some people are questioning whether the gas chambers and all those things were ever used on the Jews, that may not have ever happened.
There's no doubt in my mind that they were not real. We were stationed close to the one at Dachau.
Yes.
One of the worst. Of course, it's all worse.
Oh, yes.
It's all bad.
Absolutely.
So we heard a lot of stories about it. The people that had gone there, and blood on the walls and everything like that. All kinds of bad things. But I didn't go in any of them. We were just close to one. So that's about all I...
From the outside, did your train station or, I mean, your rails travel or any of that kind of travel bring you close enough you could see from the outside, any of the camps?
No, I didn't see any of those concentration camps. Never saw any of them.
Tell us what you were hearing.
Well, we were hearing that the one at the cow had 300,000 people killed.
Mm.
And
Do you understand most of those to have been Jews?
probably,
Jewish people?
probably most of them were Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they killed everybody that was opposed to Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
They were killed.
Mm-hmm. When you got into, let's go back to the cities now. One person that we talked to said that they were in the troops that came into the city and liberated it at the first, one of the cities, I don't remember. But they said there were people that Hitler's forces had imprisoned in cages in old factories to keep workers in their war factories. Did you hear any rumors along that line? How Hitler's mistreated the people that even were still living?
No, I didn't hear that, but he got those Jews out of those concentration camps and made them walk as they were about to be overcome.
Oh.
He would take those Jews out and take them to another camp,
Mm-hmm.
rather than let them be liberated.
Oh, so that's what happened lots of times. Oh my goodness. Well, you stayed in Germany about 9 months,
Yes.
and they were just beginning to reconstruct,
Yes.
do a little bit of cleanup. So where did you go from Germany? How did you get
I
back
came home.
How did you get back home?
I
Describe
went
that
to Bremer.
process.
I went to Bremerhaven. That was a port on the German
Uh-huh.
mainland in the Baltic. I mean, in the North Sea,
Yes.
the Baltic Sea.
Oh.
And we boarded a ship there for home.
So now it's not summer. Are you into fall now?
It's about November.
November?
About the 1st of November.
I know it's bound to have been cold on the North Sea in Germany.
That's kind of cool. Pretty cool then. Yes, it was.
Well, did they bring in some more constabulary forces to take your place, or
Yes.
what? Is that right? Were you getting out because your points were built up, or just because your term
Well,
had
my
expired?
term had expired.
Uh-huh.
I'd re-enlisted for a year and it was over.
Okay, so your
That
year
was
was
the
up.
end of my year.
Okay. What rank were you? Did they call it?
Private first class.
Private first class. Okay, so from Bremerhaven, you were put on another ship
Yes, and went to New York.
to New York City, and you had to see the Statue of Liberty.
Went up to the tip top of it.
You did?
Yes.
Well, what did you feel like when you came across from such destruction in Europe and saw that lady standing with a light?
I was looking forward to putting my foot on my beloved homeland.
Amen.
And I knew that then I would get on a bus and go down to North Carolina. I believe it was Camp Lejeune. Then I would get on a bus and go home and see my father and mother and my sisters and brothers
Oh.
be reunited with them.
With thoughts of war behind.
Yes.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to hear your story, Mr. Odle. And I would like to ask you if you have some advice for the young people of today, what that would be. Just talk from your heart for a couple of minutes. And tell me.
Advice for young people? Well, I would say, number one, serve the Lord
Mhm.
all the days of your life.
Yes.
That's the best thing that anybody could
That's a supreme
advise
advice.
people.
It
That's
sure
the
is.
number one
Mhm.
priority in my life is
Yes.
serving God. And I would advise people to,
What about the hardships of life as you're going through them in relation to what you just said?
well, I haven't had a very much of a hardship in my life. I've had a good life. God's has blessed me with a wonderful family. I have no complaints about this life.
No.
I've had a good life.
But I'm saying that for those people whose lives are going through hard times and who may be facing wars in the future that we don't even know about.
Well, just keep your eyes on the Lord and It don't matter what you're going through. The best thing you can do is just serve God.
Not try to face them on your own, but have His strength
Yes.
to live in.
Mhm.
That's very good life advice. I sure thank you for coming and visiting with us today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.